We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Kyan Wei. He is the Director of Talent Acquisition and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Chair at Therapy Brands. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit more about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Love that air quote because we grew up in a generation, partially in the as a millennial, grew up in a generation with lots of air quote that didn't happen before. It changed quite drastically, I think, through our process. I was a young leader to start as well. Want to thank you for the time, Christina. My name is Kyan Wei, as Christina has introduced. My pronouns is he, him. I have many different hats wearing when it comes to around diversity. I'd love to share that throughout our conversation today. And specifically, I've been in the talent acquisition, talent world through a majority of my career. And then I was kind of go back and think about what I want to become or what do I want to do when I grow up? I think that my unsolicited answer from my sister would told me that, remember you told me you want to become a fireman? I completely don't remember that answer at all. I think ever since I remember, I'm always a natural performer growing up, even though I am an extrovert, introvert, through various assessment, and I will attest to that. But I think partially a part of me being in front of people and then to make a difference, as corny as that sound, to have something to have a purpose behind, to be able to do something for others, have always been part of my growing mission. I think a lot of you that are watching this episode probably can also say that very few of us decide to grow up to be in HR as an aspiration, or even go to school and end up in a degree certification process. Some of us, and if not most of us, some end up in a profession where we are today and discover this wonderful profession. So excited here to share my stories with y'all.
I definitely appreciate that context. I always think it's interesting what people remember saying as well and what others kind of reflect back to. I want to talk about kind of you making a difference and also your background as well. I don't think anyone has said, when they were 6 years old, they wanted to be in HR, they wanted to be in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there are common trends as well. What is the kind of connection between your music background and that link between diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you. I think partially in the prior background, sometimes I forgot that yes, I always had the aspiration going into music prior to college, and it's something I always want to get into. And then partially being a first generation Asian in the United States, brought up from my parents, both came from Taiwan, where my ethnicity lies in. Um, going through an unconventional route, not being a doctor or a lawyer, it's always an uphill battle conversation. So I think that when I had the opportunity to really pursue a music degree during my college time courses as well, and then major in piano and minor in voice and opera study, but I always grew up in a choir. I'm a chorus boy by heart through my repertoire. I think something that the music aspect background remind me a lot of the collaboration pieces, working with the people, especially in the chorus, especially being a pianist behind the piano, accompanying others, either a singer or a larger size of group, a trio, and so on. There's a lot of coordination. It requires a very active listening skills and also to be able to adjust for the unexpected. Throughout the practice time frame, the long hours is really strengthened myself to understand the discipline. Talking about project management, there's people, process, and product slash results. That structure also helped me understand what that process really led into. I think it depends on the context, right? Depend on where the end result we're looking for. And I'm also a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People practitioner and facilitator as well. I naturally somehow found that music actually ingrained that concept of speaking with an end in mind because we know what the outcome would be. We're going to find our best way to practice and to perform to reach that outcome and result. So I think this is something my music background really taught me a lot. And individual who have studied music in the past, I think that there are two different aspects. One aspect is the discipline, which essentially are the practice aspect, very mathematical, very much focusing on the statistics, focus on what's being written in the structure. There's the other side is that creative side. So there's not one musicians are alike. I think that this somehow partially in my career, I found that besides the talent acquisition piece, the L&D piece, the diversity, equity, inclusion, it gave me that opportunity to really create something that's meaningful, to be able to help others find their journeys, write their stories through each step of the process, knowing that we can define the world as it is, but the overall process, the outcome, each of the individual have their own path. And to be able to not set a box of how you fit into my box, but I'm going to help you to give you that platform, to give you that path to create your own. I think there's something that each of us as a leader, as an influencer in any way, or even just a change agent, not just as a change agent, we all have the capability to do so, to help to enrich another human being, if not more people's life. And also, it's a two-way street. We also learn something also throughout the process. I always look at that as a win-win, which is one of the habits of 7 habits.
I absolutely love that. I think there is a lot of overlap in terms of coordination. Everybody's role is really important to play as well. The agility, the communication, active listening too, and really being able to collaborate with one another as well. I want to ask some kind of specific questions too around what you've seen work really well. And I think over the past few years too, as companies continue to grow and redefine what it means, their values, and things of that nature. Have you seen the company culture at, Therapy Brands grow and continue to scale as you continue to add new team members and people move around the company as well?
Actually, that's a great question. I think specific at Therapy Brands, who my current employer is, and I've been at Therapy Brands for a little over 2 years. We have gone through quite a significant amount of growth, but that comes into a good element and percentage of transformation as well. And I think that most company, plus most professionals, I think the past 2 to 3 years, it's something that we most likely never experienced in our lifetime. We have to learn how to adapt and transform into the format where we are. Sometimes it's for the level of survival. Sometimes for the level of how can we better enrich and take the opportunity to do something that's very different. I think specifically at Therapy Brands, because I've gone through quite a significant amount of growth by the number of new teammates joining our team in a very diversified format. And then Therapy Brands, we are a SaaS provider in the directly in the healthcare space, specifically behavioral mental health space. This is what really attract a lot of us here to make a meaningful impact into an element that has been so underutilized when it comes to a digital platform in this aspect. So a company have a clear selling point, have a specialized area that we focus in, and then partially that to be able to create that roadmap from the beginning stage, attract the right talent is very important. And of course, I always look at coming to this profession to building some initial methodologies to set the company up for success, either based on the role that's required and or based on the right industry that's coming in, or potentially based on the cultural piece I always highly emphasize on. And each company have to adapt and differ in different stages. I could work and support a Fortune 500 company and Fortune 100 companies, and also work with various small to mid-sized startup-ish companies. Each company that at different stages of maturity, the strategy may be a little different because how we set a line into the structure is extremely crucial to company success. I always look at kind of the long-term plan, the 5-year plan to where the company's vision, mission, value, culture may grow into. It sets very at the beginning stage of the process in the initial hiring TA practice.
Yeah, to really be able to build upon and scale with the company, you need to have a really good foundation, understand where you're going, what are the gaps to fill, and how you can continue to iterate on the process too. It sounds like you've also been enjoying your time at the organization. And I think, the last few years you mentioned it's something that a lot of folks have experienced for the first time and really reflecting on what we want to spend 40 plus hours a week on as well, who we want to work with, and kind of our expectations from companies too. One study found that 47% of employees reported that their stress was higher than anything they'd previously experienced in their career, but only 37% agreed their organization really understood what they needed both in their personal lives and for their families. How would you say that you're really showing up for the full lives of employees at Therapy Brands?
Thank you for that question. I think those statistics are quite shocking, right? And then we heard many different terminology from the resignation tsunami to the talent war, which I think most of us have living through the past 12 to 18 months of hiring process. I can attest to it. Yeah, it's the hardest time ever um, to um, to really find the right talent and so on. Of course, we've seen that eventually the market will probably come to harmonize to its own degree. I think specifically that showing up for the employees is the level of transparency is important to set the realistic landscape because from outside looking in, always can be everything can seem very beautified, right? I think most company, especially nowadays, will focus on the branding component. We're focusing on how does the company align in this space, and to really show that true picture and authenticity. I think we leverage with the right partners to help us really paint that picture. We try and produce as many content as possible, and I think that's really hard to do for a growing company because everybody things are changing so fast. You have the owners to really create the meaningful content out there to the market space that really putting emphasis on it is extremely important. We're trying to create the mission of and the purpose of why these roles are created, what are the expectations for these roles specifically, and potentially that introduce them into the right career map is very important. So coming back to the 5-year plan, what is the short term, mid-term, long term? What does that mean to a company's growth? It's partially sounds exciting, but to be able to deliver is another piece as well. We really want to focus on painting that proper, clear picture to make sure we're attracting the right talent versus to sell the position. I think most of TA profession I know how to sell and upsell the customer, but I think that finding that right balance to harmonize our approach is extremely important. I think that there's one last piece I want to add in here is finding that why is very important. For I think Simon Sinek that understand that I think that the why behind everything is you really help everybody to at the end of the day find a better work-life balance, find a right better understanding that here is the why of the individual or my existence. So it's a good reassuring, also reflecting moment of why I am doing what I'm doing at this very moment and where it's going and how I can impact others. So I think that why behind it, it's hard to understand, sometimes hard to verbalize. As a leader, as a manager, we got to do better and help the incoming employees to finesse, understand, recognize, and also respect, as well as have a mutual solid conversation around those, especially when we come OKRs, goals, and targets and so on.
Absolutely. Transparency is so important, and really understanding and being able to communicate and have conversations around the why of why we're meeting these goals, as you were talking about, is also critical too in terms of really effective communication, and also leads to innovation and just really open dialogue as well. I think that, we talked about earlier too, like everybody has a role to play. Everybody should have an ownership mentality around that company culture. But in terms of leadership, we know that there are all different kinds of formal and informal leaders. I want to ask, what is the unique role of human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders to really be culture champions at an organization?
Absolutely. Love that question. Specifically, that to be able to set the ground and talk about people, process, and results, to be able to set some foundations and structure is important. I think that, of course, that we want to, without doing so, it's hard to ignite and how others understand why we're doing this in the first place, and then also potentially building out the what behind it. With that being said, that identifying the potential change agents that had the aspiration and the will and also number one the capability as well depends on the company structure. Sometimes it may be we can cultivate that as part of the expectation for the employee, but I know that a lot of the company are still struggling find the funding and the full-time resources to plan for DEI programs as well. With that being said, I identify the right individual with some initial foundation strategy, and then how everybody understand that this is a safe environment. We want to make sure to lay the foundation down as well. Here's where we are. Here's the next phase. Here's phase 3, based on the timeline trajectory. So with the right people that help us champion those conversations, extremely crucial. Then we can set up the periodic cadences and also set around some of the OKRs as well, so we know that here's where we're going specifically. Content component is always a little tricky. So having the right individual that can help us drive the information with some proper OKR as well is also extremely important. as an HR leader and as a DEI leader, I think these are some of the foundation that you help to reassure that um, here are the messaging that's important to the organization, help others understand why, but also that to be able um, to help others that if you have any thoughts or specifically any question, feel free to come to me and with an open door. We want this is not just about my initiative, your initiative, it's our initiative because we're all part of the owners of the company that are helping to drive these important messages and information.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of folks are really talking about how you do this in practice, how you really think about really being leaders, modeling by example, creating the framework for success, setting those expectations. The other word that keeps coming up too, and I think a lot of leaders are talking about as well, is transparency in terms of like what that looks like. Can you share an example of transparent and effective communication? And this could be in regards to OKRs as well.
Absolutely. Have something that makes sense verbally and also in writing. I kind of like to put that in perspective. Sometimes that it can seem like open promise, but without a true alignment. Similar to, I think, the job search process as well, to be able to share things that here's a presentation we went through today, here's some of the methodologies. I think either as organic as spreadsheets, as PowerPoint, or potentially with some of the role-based roadmap can really be very helpful that are um, centering around SMART goals as well. I think it's something that's time bound, something that's very specific. And it comes very important when it comes to OKRs. And of course, having a routine cadence is very important for us to come back and visit a week from now, 2 weeks from now. Everybody's got a role, everybody's got some sort of walkaway test to divide and conquer. I think this will help everybody to drive the accountability, to push some of the potentially harder conversation we want to tackle, and it cannot be done just by one person. I think this is a level of transparency that for to be able to share. This is a company webinar. You'll find this information either through our company intercom, if you use Slack or Teams or any other platform, just to kind of reset the cadence. And then a little bit, in case you miss it moment, is always great, especially as a recorded session and so on. So individuals that may be on a PTO or may not be for any reason that cannot join us a call, they also have a reference point to go back to as well. I think these are the things that are um, traceable and also our timestamp can really help the messaging not get lost in the funnel and potentially even house them in a centralized platform. I think that will be very important. On the other aspect is that we got to say what we do and do what we say. I think by doing so in a very similar format, verbal and also in writing can really help to instill that transparency. So we don't go back to reference one. This is what you said last Tuesday, but this is, and then is it what you heard or what is all? There's always something to go back to help us recap, even meeting minutes and so on will be extremely helpful.
Absolutely. You want to be clear in who is the owner, what is the goal, why is this the goal, and really continue to follow up as well. And that's part of how you really build trust and also kind of in any relationship as well, have that psychological safety too. And I think in terms of reaching your goals, my magic hour for doing my work might be different than your magic hour than doing work as well. Nobody likes to be in back-to-back Zoom meetings too. We've talked about Zoom fatigue on this show before as well. And this plays into this idea of radical flexibility, which one study found the adoption of radical flexibility raises the number of employees defined as high performing as much as by 40%. What role does kind of radical flexibility play in your company culture at their V brands?
I love that question because I think this an element that a lot of the managers and leaders I think have partially struggled, especially if they are very excited to have everybody in the office specifically. I think that the potential risk and concern is always come into the false impression is the employee working or not, or where are they right now, what are they doing? I think ultimately understanding the why behind each role is important. So we know that there's a key deliverable, there's KPI, maybe potentially OKR. Some of the key measures helping to really understand each individual understand the why of their existence. Is there a day-to-day goal? Is there a weekly expectation? Is it maybe a monthly business review and so on? I think having those cadence set expectation is going to help to align a very strong communication mutually around what is the role entails specifically, what is expectation. There are many ways to approach this specific subject. If it's a role based that's number driven, for example, inbound, outbound calls, or if there's roles that's specific driven around any specific metrics, I think those cadence should be set up either on daily, weekly, and even one-on-one individual. I have even one manager reference to me is I just had my team report to me at the end of the day before they sign up on what they accomplished today. I think those are some of the pieces that as simple as that, without it coming across being micromanaging, but it's setting that clear mutual expectation and have the employees buy in. And this can be overall ultimately refined through the process. I think that transparency and also accountability will help to drive and negate a lot of why are you asking me this question, or I don't feel like I'm being respected. But if that expectation is set clearly, it becomes part of a routine of good. I just send my daily sign off and then I'm done. And that's easier, I think, probably sometime for maybe an hourly non-exempt employees. I think depends on the cadence. It really take I think the manager and also the potential leader of a organization or department to really align what may works best for them. And I think that with that being said, I think majority of our workforce are working virtually. I think these are some of the area that really helps I think each managers and leaders to address certain key areas as well, and also to pivot accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we are talking about conversations with your manager, radical flexibility, the role of leaders, company culture, and what you were talking about as well, representation, thinking about talent acquisition and processes there, we need to think about kind of equity and the equitable processes that are put in place and really think about how it is like the DNA for how we are moving about these kind of different initiatives as well. I know you mentioned a couple examples. Is there any other way that you want to highlight that diversity and equity and inclusion are really manifested across therapy brands as an organization?
Absolutely. I think as a growing organization, we have a very diversified workforce in the matter of because we've gone through some acquisitions specifically. We also hire strategically well, I think, based on some of the key gaps that we have identified along the process. I think that each company is a little different, especially for company in the small to mid-sized space. Sometimes we run lean, but mighty. I think that most company that come into DEI component has oh, this is what we don't have. Check that box, or let's go ahead and fix it. It's a very different mindset of kind of creating that long-term strategy of here's where we are, where are the gap analysis to where we're going to get to a year from now, 2 year from now, 5 year from now. I'm personally, I love the 5 year plan because it gives us a really good opportunity to really set a routine cadence component. I think that this is not, it cannot be done by one person. You need to also, of course, I have some of the executive buy-in. So just really be able to manage the upward conversations and get the key decision makers buying as well. You have to drive the information, of course, that from peer perspective to kind of the identifying the key change agents that's out there in the workforce are very important. It also had to be diverse in many different aspects from career level, the type of the role, potentially geographic area, maturity. I think each demographic to really make sure that we have um, the proper change agents that will help us drive the conversation on something that's meaningful to all. That's a hard thing to do, but it also can be ignite, I think, through the sheer passion that we have for the people, for our people, I think through our organizations that we're working towards the same goal.
Yeah, I feel like we can definitely continue our conversation for an hour, but I know we are ending our time together. So I want to see if there's anything that I didn't specifically ask you that you would like to share or underscore any key takeaways about the many things that we discussed here today.
I think you asked lots of really great questions. I think this is a topic we can keep talking on forever. I think that I'll probably want to leave one thing out to individuals that either in my similar role or potentially that looking up to when they go into this profession. I think that they have the love for the people and they'll put people first in this aspect. And it's we talk about being a leader, being a servant leader specifically. TA, HR. I think our time is not ours, and then but you're able to realign, to reset our mindset at any given point in time is very important. So we got to make sure we take good care of ourselves in order to help others. I know that the past 2 to 3 years have been very challenging, but you know what? There are more exciting things on the horizon for sure. I think as we crawl from this post-pandemic era, so I want to just share a word of encouragement that you are not alone. We're all in this together, and then I would love to, of course, network and maybe learn for me to learn more from y'all.
I love that. It's a really good note to end on, an encouraging word. Thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Likewise, thank you, Christina.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening at All Voices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.